And we're starting the readings for May of 2024, which tells you that, yes, the digital version of the Science of Man magazine came in. It arrived today, which is technically a day early. However, here it is. In the meantime, Reverend Jesse had already got his advance copy. He was going to send me a copy so that I could read from it. But thank you very much, Reverend Jesse. I don't need to do that. We start a brand new series of readings, and I'll read you the intro as usual about the writer this month. Centers for Spiritual Living and Creative Life Spiritual Center are all-inclusive, which means we don't differentiate on the basis of religion, of gender, of nationality, of racial origin, or anything. We accept everybody who comes in. And sometimes the language that's used by different people is, sometimes to some people it's disturbing, and sometimes to other people it's just odd. And these days there's a lot of gender non-specific language that's being used. For instance, the plural form of the third person, it, which is they, is often used to refer to individuals as well as groups of people. One time it was just a plural pronoun, but now it can be applied anywhere. And our writer this month is one who chooses to use the gender non-specific terms. If it seems really awkward in the sentence or in the paragraph, I might change it. Otherwise, I might just read it out as they are. But I'm just telling everybody in advance that oftentimes when the pronoun they is being used or their is being used, it's referring to a person and not a group of people. And as I said, to some people, this is odd. I know some people question it and say, why do they have to do this? Well, we all have different reasons for doing things. We all think about ourselves in different ways. And I'm just asking everybody who listens to these readings to be open. You know, as I've mentioned before, I know a lot of people have got major issues with the word God because of experiences in their childhood. And that's why I often try to change it to the divine spirit, the all, or something like that. Just because, well, why would I want to upset people when I'm doing these readings? And I don't mind changing things just to make things easier for everybody. So that's a kind of long-winded introduction to say, if some of the terminology seems odd to you, just go with the flow and just substitute your own. When I read Ernest Holmes, and Ernest Holmes, because of when he wrote most of this stuff in the first part of the 20th century, using almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively, he used the male pronoun. And the male pronoun wasn't intended just to refer to males. It was intended to refer to human beings. It was intended to, unless he specifically said he or she, he was normally referring to people in general and not males in particular. Myself and several others, I mean, maybe lots of ministers around, have actually changed that and will make it gender non-specific. Because I had a little bit of a, not a discussion today, but I pointed out to somebody today at a meeting I was at earlier. I was at a volunteer meeting. That's why I've got this on. I was a volunteer. It's called Volunteer Appreciation Luncheon. It's where the Woodlands Chamber of Commerce puts on a free luncheon for all the nonprofits that are members of the chamber. And they're each allowed to send 2 people free of charge, and some send more and pay extra and so on and so forth. Well, one of the ladies there, I am to point out to her, I said, well, if you go back and read Genesis about creation, it says, let us create man in our image, male and female. Well, she didn't say anything, but I could tell by the look on her face, it didn't go down too well. But it's true, it's there, it's in black and white. So go read it. It's in chapter 1 of Genesis, talking about creation. It's the Judeo-Christian Islamic story of creation. Having said that, I'm going to get on with the reading actually, and it's, oops, I wish my mouse would behave. The cover to the daily guides this month inside the magazine says, "When the world tells you to shrink, expand." And that was Elaine Welteroth. I did not look her up, but I will because I'm always curious. I just didn't get the chance beforehand. And there's some artwork there. It shows somebody stood on top. I can't tell whether it looks like a big rock formation, but it could also have been a cloud. But I think it's a big rock formation. In fact, it could potentially be two people, one stood on top of another. It's not really clear with like a background that's got clouds and it's got a starry sky. I mean, like you can see galaxies, lots of stars in there. So obviously, and there's a sunset going on as well. So it must have been taken or painted somewhere where there is a chance to see the stars as they are. Having said that, here we go. This is, the author is called, she is Reverend Ryan Alexander, or he is Ryan Alexander, or they are Ryan Alexander. Reverend Ryan Alexander says, "This month we explore the journey from good to great to grand. This journey should not be viewed as having a destination we reach and then we're done. Instead, view it as an invitation to allow the experiences and the rhythms of our lives to move us in ways that create just a little more space for our own authentic expressions. I invite you to join me on this journey, one that has no final destination, but plenty to see along the way." Reverend Ryan Alexander, and in parentheses, they/them, is the co-founder and co-director of Soul Evolution Collaboration, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. They also serve as education manager at CSL, that is Centers for Spiritual Living. Their work has its foundation in social activism, striving to create inclusive spaces of empathy, compassion, authenticity, and belonging. With a passion for engaged spirituality, Alexander dedicates their work to exploring the impact of applying universal principles on our daily experiences. Their commitment to foster our interconnectedness is evident in their ongoing work to bridge the gap between individual spiritual growth and collective social change through educational programming and community engagement. I realize this is a lot. They seek to inspire others to embrace the path of holistic transformation, a path that harmonizes personal evolution with the collective pursuit of equity, compassion, and connection. Nobody's asking you to remember all that. Least of all, I'm not asking myself to remember all that. However, it serves as the introduction to the readings. And here we go with the first reading. It's called The One Thing. The One Thing. Vulnerability lets in light. And that was Adrienne Posey, whom I have to look up. Ernest Holmes in This Thing Called You says, "There's something within you beyond all doubt and fear. Something that's never been limited by your acts or destroyed by your feeling. This is the only something that can make you whole." And Holmes is talking here about your higher self. If you don't know where your higher self is, well, we have classes that teach these things. It means the spiritual essence of yourself beyond your ego. And this is what Reverend Alexander says. "My wife and I often play a game we call The One Thing I Don't Want You to Know About Me Right Now. Okay, I'll be honest. It's mostly her trying to play the game and me trying to change the subject. Isn't that just what we do? Being vulnerable is no walk in the park, especially when we're conditioned to hide all the things that challenge and scare us. Now, I do have some comments about this at the end, so bear with me. Listen to the whole reading or the rest of the reading. And if it offends you or it upsets you, then you say, I can't do that. That's really fine. But just listen to it. And then I am going to make comments on this because I think it needs unpacking. Brene Brown, who just happens to live in Houston, as some of you may know, defines vulnerability as a state of emotional exposure that comes with a certain degree of uncertainty. It involves a person's willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to love and be loved. That's the end of the quote. Reverend Alexander goes on to say, any attempt to explore the depths of ourselves and others, especially when we're unsure of the outcome, is a lesson in vulnerability born from our desire to live the fullest expression of ourselves. Reverend Alexander carries on. So what is the one thing I don't want you to know about me right now? Okay, I'll play along, but just this once. The one thing that I don't want you to know is I'm often anxious and afraid, with a side of self-doubt thrown in for good measure. But you know what? That's okay. Each day is a new opportunity to explore those parts of ourselves we've kept hidden out of fear. Making peace with their existence is part of the wholeness of life. The more we cultivate our willingness to be vulnerable and create spaces where others can do the same, the more we will experience the ultimate prize of vulnerability, which is true connection. Okay. So what they're talking about here is being vulnerable. It isn't okay for everybody to just start off being vulnerable. I mean, it really isn't, because you need a good spiritual and psychological foundation if you're going to start being vulnerable. You have to be able to have the wherewithal to withstand it. So I'm not recommending that anybody just goes out and does it for the first time unless they're on a good psychological and spiritual foundation. And that is why we do our spiritual work, and why sometimes we have to see therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists to put us on a strong, sound footing. Vulnerability is good. It helps us to grow. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard for me to accept that I'm not as comfortable in public in one-on-one situations as my wife. You know, she's a social butterfly. She'll go and talk to anybody about anything, anywhere. And that's not me. Getting up in front of a crowd of 1,000 people, that's me. But talking to people one-on-one, unless I really know them, it's hard for me to do that. But I really recommend that this is a call for us all to do our spiritual work, to get that good grounding. As Jesus said, and I quote Jesus a lot because I think that's the foundation of our teaching. And if you look in the Science of Mind textbook, you'll see Ernest Holmes quotes Jesus an awful lot. When he said that, you know, the house that's built on this foundation of rock will withstand anything, but one that's built on mud or something soft, it's going to get blown away. And it's just the same when we're talking about ourselves. It's exactly the same. We need that strong foundation. And anybody who recommends, if you are not in that psychological and spiritual mode to be open and vulnerable, anybody who tells you to do that is wrong. But telling you that vulnerability is a good thing and helps you to grow, yes, it is. But I think it's a process of being able to get to that. And you start with very small things. For instance, you know, my mother-in-law, who has since moved on to the other plane of existence, was afraid of snakes. Even the word snake in Dutch, which is slang, would have scared her. But she was able to open up, admit it, because that's something that's easier. People are afraid of lots of different things. But as I said, being vulnerable is good when you've got that strong spiritual foundation. You know, they don't send astronauts into space without any training because God knows what would happen. And they've got to be physically up to it. Otherwise, who knows what might happen to them? You know what I mean? So the message I get here is this, that being vulnerable and being open is good and it helps you to grow. However, you've got to start from a strong, solid foundation. That's my take from this first reading. I didn't read ahead to find out what Reverend Ryan Alexander is telling us in future. And maybe I will read 2 or 3 in advance and then come back because it could very well influence what I say. And maybe the next one says what I'm saying now. I don't know. So take these readings in their stride. Use them to the extent that you feel you're able. And if you need to go talk to somebody, you know, ministers especially, and sometimes practitioners and therapists and so on, are there for you to ask them questions and help you to grow. So take advantage of it. And even the affirmation itself, you can take in small steps. It says, I'm open to exploring the depths of myself and others in ways that support authenticity and connection. It's a good affirmation. But as I said, you need to take these things in small steps initially. And then when you get to the point where you've got that strong foundation, yes, you can be a lot more open. You can be a lot more vulnerable. And we can all learn to grow together. So all I got to say today, I think Reverend Lisa started, I've got to check and listen to what she said this morning. I think she started from the Science of Mind textbook. And it's, for me, it's probably a good idea because, yeah, I've studied the Science of Mind textbook, but I don't read it every single day. Like some people read the Bible every day, you know, I refer to it. Some people read the Science of Mind textbook every day, I refer to it. So maybe it's a good time for me to actually start some of that. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Reverend Lisa will be there. We do have a book study going on tonight. We have a book study philosophy thing tomorrow. We have one on Wednesday. We have one on philosophy Fridays and Saturdays. Reverend Jesse's class on the Ernest Holmes has started. There will be another class starting next week, and I'll tell you more about it closer to the time. And it's by another of our fantastic ministers, Reverend Katie Ross-Brigati. We have a good team. We really do have a good team. So until next time, please take care of yourselves. Look after yourselves. Build up that foundation. And then not only will you grow, you can help other people as well. So until next time, namaste.